Hello and welcome to the Uplifting Relationships Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Cassandra Bolar, and you are in for a treat today. You remember how sometimes I would say we would have amazing guests on here on the podcast, sometimes a therapist or another guest, another expert in the field. And so you are in for a treat because today we have Latoya Hayes, who is an amazing therapist as well, and she works here in Georgia. And I'm gonna let her introduce herself because she has so many wonderful things to share, and we are just beyond delighted to have you. So thank you so much for joining us here. And so just tell us a little bit about yourself, like, what do you do and what got you to that place? Kind of what's your why?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be a part of the uplifting relationships community and family. But like you said, I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Georgia, and I work with women who are trying to just find that balance, like what we're going to talk about today in regards to balancing their home life, their work life, regulating their emotions. So like you said, just trying to figure out as women, how can we manage all the demands that we have on us, especially in this day and age?
Oh gosh, because there's a lot.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot. So the question essentially is, can we have it all? Can you really have it all?
And you know what, Cassandra? I used to say that when I was in college. I used to tell people, I'm going to have it all. I'm going to have a booming business. I'm going to have the best marriage. I'm going to have the perfect kids. And really, that's just unrealistic. And so I think as human beings, we just need to realize it's not all or nothing. We can have all or something. Yeah. And so trying to have it all, we first have to define what does that look like, because for everybody that looks differently.
That's so good, because I think sometimes it's this abstract idea of what we should have, and we haven't even really defined what that is. There's this exercise I do sometimes with couples, and I say, what does your ideal week look like? Because sometimes we have this expectation in our hearts for what it looks like, but we haven't clearly defined it. So we don't even have a target.
Exactly.
And we're really just honestly going based on feelings. I love your area of specialty because, I feel like there are more demands on people.
Yes.
And entrepreneurship is just truly growing by leaps and bounds. And, and women are actually kind of taking the torch with that piece, right? Like with all the new businesses that are being built, a lot of them are by
women. Yeah.
So like in your practice, what do you see with people who are trying to maybe navigate all these different spaces of trying to make their dreams come true, whether it's in business or whether it's in their regular career and like managing the home and, their kids, or some people are doing it all by themselves. They may not have a spouse or partner. Like, oh my gosh, like what do you see firsthand? Like, what do you see with everyone?
And like you said before with the exercise, I see oftentimes where women don't necessarily have the time or the space to sit down and say, okay, what does success look like to me? And depending on what it looks like to you, then how can I get a support system around me to help me with those things? And so then that results in burnout, compassion fatigue, other illnesses, like you weaken your immune system. Like people truly underestimate the power of stress and what it can do to our bodies, also to what it can do to our minds. And so really what I would tell people is to just, first of all, let's slow down, because oftentimes social media or these invisible rules to the world, like I'm supposed to have this by a certain age, or I'm supposed to be doing this, or my business is supposed to have this amount of, notoriety or success. And sometimes it's just like, okay, let me just slow down and take a step back and say, okay, what does success look like to me? What do I want? Because sometimes people just want to be able to have time freedom, financial freedom, where sometimes people do. They want that glitz and glam and they kind of want to be in the forefront. So it's like, what is it that you desire for your life? But take it outside of what the world says you feel like the world says you have to have. and make it personal. Because I think that's what drives a lot of just this imbalance.
Mm-hmm. You said so many things. Oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, let me get all these nuggets. Because you said so many things that just really struck me and really resonated. One thing was about seeking help and support and having a support system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we feel like we have to wear this cape.
Yes.
Where we have to be superwoman and we have to do it by ourselves. And I'm not good unless I'm managing everything. I'm holding everything down. But you talked about the health implications of that, how that impacts your physical health as well as emotionally, you know, feeling like you have to do it all about on your own. And you said a term that I don't know if everyone's familiar with that term, but compassion fatigue.
Yes.
Could you define that a little bit and kind of help us all get a good understanding of that?
And compassion fatigue is simply when you find yourself in a space to where you've overextended yourself, to where you are, it's mostly found in giving or helping professions. So like your teachers or nurses, your pastors, but also too like your moms, your sisters, your friends. You can experience that compassion fatigue, and it's essentially, it goes just beyond that burnout. Where burnout you can feel mostly physically at times, where that compassion fatigue we feel it mentally and emotionally. And so some things that we can do as far as having a support system. Sometimes you can have a friend. I may have a friend where you just text them, girlfriend, check in. Like, how are you, girl, where you at? You good? Because it's like, if you have your own stuff going on, it's like, I want to be present for somebody, but I'm struggling. But sometimes all we need to know is that somebody's thinking of us.
Yeah.
So just having someone to say like, hey, and you, Cassandra, that's a whole nother podcast you can have. Women, we need to learn how to be better friends to one another.
Ooh, come on now. That is so good.
You know, I don't think we talk enough about friendships, and just even being able to say to my friend, hey, do you have the emotional capacity for me to talk to you about what I got going on?
Ooh. Oh, so I'm not dumping. I'm not vomiting on you. I'm making sure, hold up, you got a container for this?
Exactly.
And I'm not assuming that you have the capacity right now. Maybe you're going through as well. And it's time for me to be even considerate of you. Like, do you even have the emotional space?
Exactly.
As a friend, for me to share like what I'm going through.
Exactly.
You know, and friendship is just so important.
It is.
And I feel like sometimes this is so relevant because sometimes I think we're just looking to our spouses or you know, like our intimate partner as like the end all be all.
Right.
And we're putting so much on them when we could have this diversity and seeking out like relational diversity.
Right.
Friends, sisters, so that we're not looking to one person to carry all that weight.
Yeah.
I remember I was listening to a TED Talk by Esther Perel, and she said, we are now looking to one person to provide for us what a village used to provide.
Exactly. And that's what I was just about to say. Cultivate your community.
Yes.
And as adults, we can do that. Cultivate your community. Like, who do you want to be in your close circle? Who can speak into you and you feel like you can receive it?
Yes.
Who can you speak into and they receive it? And so it can be scary, but also fun if you think about it, because it's like, you know what? Let me assess my circle and see, you know, how can we build each other up? How can we support one another? Because right now in this day and age, one thing you cannot skip over community. You cannot skip over support.
Yeah, you can't, because, you know, I think we all thrive in community, right? It gives us, I think, another level of accountability. It gives us another level of support. And I think, you know, sadly enough, I think the whole pandemic kind of fractured some of those community supports that people had, you know, and now people are just looking to that one person. And I think that weight is too much.
Yeah, it is.
It's just too much for one person. And I want to kind of double back on like because I think this is so big with like, we got some big goals, right?
Yes.
Like ladies, they ain't playing. I mean, you know, we're not playing anymore
Yeah.
when it comes to like our goals and our dreams. Like, I mean, and they're huge. They're big
huge.
goals.
And they're good goals
They're
too.
good goals
Yeah.
too. But sometimes you get that mommy guilt.
Yes.
Or you get that, you know, am I being a good spouse guilt
Yeah.
or what have you?
Am I
and
being
like,
a good business
am I
owner?
being a good business owner? Am I slacking over there?
Yeah.
And or if you're working full time, sometimes what is that whole saying? They want you to work like you're single and then or pretend like you're not a parent. I'm not good with those colloquialisms and acronyms, but it's something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And it can be hard. And it's almost like, so this is a question that we had from the community. So I reached out to our Uplifting Relationships community on Facebook. It's a free community if you want to go. Hey, Uplifting Relationships community.
A good community.
But one lady, she was just saying, what do you do when your dreams are different from your spouse? Like you have goals that you want to accomplish and your spouse's goals are in a different area. Like, how do you navigate that? And how do you like both work on those goals together? But they're different. Like, what do you do in those cases?
As you were talking, boundaries came to my mind. Having boundaries and honoring your boundaries. So it's not that one spouse has to give up their dream for the other, but it's like, okay, how can we set boundaries so that everybody goal and dream is being touched? And 9 times out of 10, if they look at both businesses, they may overlap somehow, and that may be the purpose of their union.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like sometimes we have to get out of our own way.
Yeah.
Man, that pride and ego is strong.
Ooh, mama.
I used to think to myself, like, oh, you know, I'm not a prideful person. I got a lot of pride. When I walk my way and I want something done, I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, let me reassess myself. But boundaries is something I think we, you know, it's a buzzword right now, but what we don't realize is that we break our own boundaries first. So even though right now the buzzword is like, oh, I'm putting up my boundaries against you or whatnot, I always ask a person, well, what are your personal boundaries that you break every day?
Ooh. What promise do you not keep to yourself?
Right. And so if you can't even keep a promise to yourself, how are you then enforcing it to somebody else?
Oh my goodness. That's so good.
So, you know, in that situation, it's kind of like you and your spouse, you sit down and talk, okay, like how will our household look if we're both pursuing these goals?
Yeah. That's so good. It reminds me of this scripture that Bishop Bronner would talk about where he said that God wouldn't give you twins and make you choose which one lives. And something about that resonated so much with my heart. And I was like, Lord, that is so true. And sometimes I'm starting to recognize that it's not that one has to die, but it's kind of like what baby is crying the most right now. What baby needs the most attention right now. And there's going to be a time where the other baby may cry. You don't have to choose. You just have to find balance in meeting the most immediate need right now.
Exactly.
And I actually have like a life experience that aligns with that. So what's really interesting, like y'all know my dream. My dream is to help relationships and marriages and all that. I guess it's quite apparent. And my husband, he's a chiropractor. And when we got married for a while, I stopped counseling. I got out of academia. I wasn't teaching at a university. And when you talk about pride, God had to disentangle my identity from what I did.
Yes.
And my worth from what I did. And he told me, Cassandra, you are valuable regardless of what you do for a living.
Exactly.
You're valuable because you're my child, regardless of what you're doing. And so I took a year to kind of learn. I worked in another office. It wasn't even his office. It was another chiropractic office, so I could kind of learn the ropes.
Yeah.
And then I worked in the office with him together for 2 years.
Wow.
And I thought I wasn't going to get back to academia, but I didn't feel any kind of way. Now I got some flack for it. I mean, some people like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing in that office? Somebody else can do that. But I just really knew I wanted to be there for the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I wouldn't get back, but God is so good. I feel like he honored that. And now I'm doing dream research when it comes to academia. Now I'm doing work that I think is actually better than what I was doing before.
Yeah.
And I feel like whenever that it may not be your dreams have to be completely postponed, but maybe your baby ain't crying right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe the other person's baby is crying.
Right. And you're building a legacy. So like even when you did that, you took that time off, it was about, okay, we're building a legacy here.
Yeah.
And trust me, I know all about the whole twins thing because I am a mom of twins.
You gotta live this
right. And so I didn't choose which one I was going to feed first or second. Sometimes it's about, okay, simultaneously.
Oh.
So sometimes I used to sit them both, have the little spoon and, so that regimen, those boundaries, that discipline. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that's maybe what it takes too in regards to, okay, we have these two passions, we have these two businesses. How are we going to manage it? What discipline will it take to put the work in both?
Mm-hmm. Both and.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be either or. It could be both and
yes.
at the same time.
And what legacy are we building?
Yeah, yeah. So I want to kind of dive deeply into, because you talk a lot about the emotional components.
Yes.
I think a lot of times we think about like the practical. How do I balance like physically being at home? Like I need to cook dinner tonight or, like, some of the practical things. But sometimes there is an emotional weight of having a lot of things that you're juggling. In your practice, like, what do you see emotionally that a lot of the women are dealing with, and maybe even their spouses? Like, what is like the kind of emotional concerns that they're coming to you for? And then on the other side, what are some of the solutions to help? So what are they kind of coming to you for? And then what ways do you think could potentially help? Now, this is one thing that I love about this show, family, is that, when you're a therapist and you have your therapist hat on, you kind of have some rules and regulations and things you can't say. You can't just come out and say, girl, you don't need to do that. I can't like give you advice. I can't be liable in that way. But I want you to say whatever you feel like. If you feel like this would be super helpful, if I had I didn't have to sugarcoat stuff, or maybe not sugarcoat stuff, but if I didn't have to like be behind that veil, a little bit of the profession, like kind of straight shooting.
Yeah. So like you said, the emotional weight, first of all, a lot of women carry that because it's just, we interact with so many different people and we're natural nurturers.
Yes, we are.
We're natural incubators. You give us something and it will grow. That's good or bad, though. Because if you give us seeds of bitterness or anything like that, that's going to grow to that emotional weight, to that turmoil, to that just depression, anxiety. So just that's what I see most of. People don't realize that just those unspoken concerns, how they've taken root, and then now they're showing up in ways of I'm feeling anxious, or I'm losing interest in things that I once loved, or I'm not attending to the tasks that I used to attend to. So those are kind of all like little red flags that women can pay attention to. And I know we're focusing on women, but just people in general too.
Yeah.
Can focus on and say like, okay, I need to first stop and check in with me. And then also too, like how often do you just stop and check in with yourself?
Yes.
How often do you just look in the mirror and say like, am I okay? How are you doing today? And so some people are like, oh, why do I got to do all that? But you'll be surprised because you say negative things to yourself all day. And you don't say, let me stop being negative or let me stop downing myself. So it's like when I ask someone to speak positively over themselves, it's kind of like, well, does it take all that? And then I just ask them, well, it's the same way if you speaking negatively over yourself. And so we don't even realize that sometimes.
We don't. A lot of times we are not consciously assessing that inner voice.
Yes.
And we talk to ourselves more than we talk to anyone.
Yes, we do.
And that narrative is literally driving our emotions.
Yes.
Is driving how we show up. And if it's negative, we'll show up in a defeated way, in a constricted way.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the solutions?
Yes. My number one thing is, especially for women, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Tell someone what you need, especially around the home. If you have a partner, if you have a spouse, first of all, discover what it is that you need. Because oftentimes we don't know what we need. So then it's hard to communicate our needs.
Say that again.
Yeah. So first of all, stop and discover what do you need, and then communicate that to your partner or to your spouse in regards to this is what I need. This is how I need help. Same way with friendships. How do you need your friends to show up for you? If it's a simple text, if it's putting a girls' night out on the calendar, if it's like planning a trip and you just have something to look forward to. And also to taking time to just rest. We underestimate the power of rest as well, too. We think it is counterproductive or laziness. And really, you're more productive when you've given your mind and your emotions time to rest. But the more you pour into yourself, the more you'll be able to pour into others. So that's what I notice mainly with the women that I see, is that they're beyond running on fumes. And they're still trying to go at full capacity.
Yes. What does that look like physically? Like, have you seen people who've like literally hit a wall and it has impacted their health? Like, what does that look like?
It looks like symptoms of a stroke. Like, I've had clients who've lost their speech, and doctors thought that they had a stroke, but really it was stress.
What?
It looks like hair loss. Yes. It looks like weight loss or weight gain. It looks like foggy brain, like just not being able to think clearly or process things clearly. Looks like oversleeping or not being able to go to sleep. Oftentimes our body craves the least amount of things that's going to help us when we're in stressful moments. So like sugar and caffeine.
Things that make us actually tank afterwards.
Exactly. So especially staying away from those things, and just physical activity. You don't have to go out and run a marathon or anything like that, but going for a walk and doing it by yourself.
Yes.
Because sometimes we just need a break from all of our roles and responsibilities to where I don't have to be Toya, the mom, the wife, the daughter, the entrepreneur, where I can just be Toya, the woman.
That is so good. I think sometimes it's easy when you have multiple hats to forget about that side of you. It's easy to forget that, I'm a person too.
Right.
and that's right. It says like, love others as you would yourself. Or do unto others as you would do unto yourself. Yeah. And it makes me think about sometimes we forget to love ourselves.
Yes.
And a lot of times there's this guilt. There's this guilt to rest. There's this idea, there's this kind of hustle culture.
Yes.
Instead of moving in God's grace, like where is that guilt coming from? Where are people getting these ideas that if I take care of myself and I rest, then I'm wrong?
Right.
Like, where do you think this guilt is coming from?
And I really just think it's what we call the societal norms, where it has just been, constantly put in our faces that this is what a woman looks like.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, will I continue to chase this unrealistic expectation? And will I identify for myself
Yes.
what a woman looks like?
You know what's so interesting about those societal norms and things like that? I just think about like my mom's generation. And, you know, they were working, most of them were working 9 to 5s and things of that nature. But I feel like now there's this expectation to be like super amazing at work, maybe have a side hustle, maybe have your own business, you know, be perfectly in shape with your abs after 3 or 4 kids.
Right.
Like there's like
Be your child's teacher.
Be your child's teacher. it's like if you're not 100% in everything, then something's wrong with you.
Right.
And one thing I had to realize is that I had to recognize what are the areas that I really want to be 100% in.
Exactly.
What are the areas where I'm okay if I'm a 60-70% over here, but with my family, with my husband, like I want to be as close as possible.
Right.
And I had to kind of let go of the expectation that I was going to be 100% in all areas at one time.
Exactly. Setting priorities, basically, like what are your priorities? And that may look different for everybody, and being okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And being okay with that. And I think that's the releasing of the guilt.
Yes.
I think sometimes we give grace to others, but we don't to ourselves.
Not at all. Yeah.
You know, and I'm just like, that's so needed because like then you'll run at 100 and eventually you'll give out in some kind of way, and you don't want it to be your health. You don't want it to be, you know, defeat, or you don't want it to be burnout per se.
Or depression.
Or anxiety or what have you.
Right. And that's why, you know, I know every year people love to set like these New Year resolutions. And I encourage people, get away from New Year resolutions, get away from it, because you set yourself up. What happens is people set these huge goals that they may have never done before. And instead of breaking things down into smaller bites, they set these huge goals. So what happens is they get frustrated when they don't meet that goal. So then they give up. And so it's like this cycle of like self-defeat and beating yourself up until where you're not making any progress.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like, okay, if you say, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock every morning to exercise, knowing that you've never done that before. And so then you're not doing it. So then you're beating yourself up because like, oh, I didn't get up. How about just try to get up 10 minutes earlier than you did the day before?
Yeah. And not make it something that is unrealistic. And now you are punishing yourself or beating yourself up because honestly, that was a little too far-fetched, honey.
Exactly.
You know, and it makes me think of this whole idea of habit stacking.
Yes.
Where you just add a new habit on to an already previously established habit, and it's easier for you to flow into that.
Exactly.
You know, you're going to brush your teeth.
Right.
So maybe if you say like, you know, okay, I'm going to brush my teeth and, you know, try to, you know, listen to something positive, or maybe listen to a sermon while I'm getting ready. It's easy to do because you already, you know you're going to brush your teeth. You know, at least if you do one thing in the morning, you're going to brush those teeth.
And that's why your doctors say, put your medicine next to your toothbrush, because they know the same thing. They know that, okay, you're going to brush your teeth, you're going to see your medicine, more than likely you're going to take it.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. So I had a question that I was going to, you know, ask you when it comes to like the self-care piece.
Yes.
And like, are there any specific suggestions that you have when it comes to self-care in particular?
Yes, because self-care, people normally think of, oh, I went and got my nails done and my hair done. That is not self-care. Self-care, I would start internally.
Ooh.
And that's with jotting down, you know, what's going on inside. Like I like to tell people to dump your brain, and it doesn't have to be in sentences or anything, because I just want to see, what are you telling yourself every day? So write down completely whatever thoughts you have in your mind, and then let's work from there, because you'll start to see like, oh, wow, I'm worrying about this, or, oh, wow, I said that to myself. And then we can work from there. But self-care, I feel it starts internally, assessing what do you need? What do you want? What makes you happy? What puts a smile on your face? And I say what makes you happy a little, with a little hesitancy in my voice, because it's kind of like, happiness is fleeting.
Yes.
So it's like, what brings you joy, I would say.
Okay. So when we think about dreams, we're oftentimes thinking about like what brings you joy. But this is a question that I have in respect to, when are our dreams valid, or when are we trying to use our dreams to kind of validate us? When has it moved from a God ambition to amplifying Him, using your gift, doing your assignment in the earth, to it you trying to amplify you?
Exactly.
And it being about your pride, your worth, you trying to prove something in value. Because sometimes I think that what happens is we have put unrealistic expectations on ourselves, because our dreams are honestly sometimes about selfish ambition.
Right.
Prove to the world, I'm something, I'm somebody. When God already said, you are significant, you are of value. It's not your performance. It's not what other people think of you. So how do we even know? I was just thinking about, like, how do we even know the difference between this being like, I'm trying to prove something about myself, and that's why I want to make this money so I can prove people I got a good idea, and I'm over here doing my thing, between I'm trying to amplify the kingdom in the earth. I'm trying to like really just fulfill my assignment. And maybe my assignment is not just in a business or what I do, but sometimes maybe me being who I'm called to be, that is me operating in my assignment. Like, do you think that sometimes can we be overly ambitious in ways that are actually hurting us? And how do you distinguish between when you're in the flow of grace and amplifying like God's, assignment, or you trying to amplify your own significance?
I think no matter what industry you're in, when it comes down to business, you have to have a love of people. And if you don't have a love of people, it's going to show. And that's an indication of like, okay, maybe I have my own selfish ambitions here, or, I have my own ulterior motives. Because no matter what you do, you have to love people. Like, even with you and your community, you have a love of seeing marriages thrive. It can be an accountant. They have a love of people, of helping people manage their finances and making sure their taxes are in place. Even for me, the reason why I want to be a therapist is because I have a love of people and how we think. Like, I'm fascinated with how we think and why we behave the way we behave, and just seeing people be healthy mentally, especially within our community. So the bottom line is you have to have a love of people.
It sounds like kind of, is it about you or is it about others? Exactly. That's like your measuring stick. Like, what's your motivation?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we don't sit back and say, like, what's my motivation? And I think it's easy to kind of step over into it, like having the wrong motive if you're not careful, because a good thing can become a not so good thing if your intentions are wrong. And it's like, I think you have to kind of keep a gauge on that. You kind of have to test that out a little bit to kind of see, like, is my heart in the right spot?
Exactly.
Is my heart for the people? And things like that. I think that is so important as well. So
and then people pay for what they value. So when you have that love of people and you're operating in your passion, the pay is just a byproduct of that. That's just gonna come.
That makes me think too that when you may be overly focused about the money or about like what you're going to get, then maybe that is when maybe you've stepped out a little bit from the people. Now, granted, you know, especially if you're a self-sustaining solopreneur or you're a business owner, CEO, you have to have, your books have to be in the black, right?
Right, exactly.
You know, we definitely want that, and you have to be conscious of that. But, you know, it's just something to, you know, consider as well. So, oh my goodness, this is so good. This is good and juicy. I love it. I love it because I think this is so real. I think the map that we have today for navigating life as wives, as moms, even, you know, single moms, like it is so different than it was, I think, even 30 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It is so different, you know, as well. But then I also wonder, is for contemporary women and for contemporary families in general, are our priorities shifting? And is that shift problematic? Because the Pew Research Center, they were doing like a parenting survey, and they found that most parents today, so it seems like parents, their encouragement is different today than it was in times past, such that, you know, you used to get a lot of pressure, you know, when you get married, when you have kids, this and the other.
Yeah.
That pressure, that social pressure, even from parents, is not the way that it used to be in times past. I believe that they were reporting that 80% of parents said that they very much so wanted their children, or extremely wanting their children, like if it was like on a Likert scale, and it was like on the higher ends of encouraging their children to get a good job and have a successful career. And based on that survey, they were prioritizing that more over their children getting married and having children. And I always think about this from a kingdom perspective, because essentially when we're thinking about families, you know, families and marriage is not something that we created for ourselves. It's something that God created for us. And so it has so much purpose and it has so much meaning. And I know everybody cannot physically have children. I'm not saying that, you know, but marriage is a good thing, and it's a good thing for our kids. So for me, when I see that, it kind of troubles me, because like, where is going to be the positive encouragement and reinforcement for marriage? And I understand it's not for everybody, but if everybody opts out, if everybody sees it as insignificant, then that could be potentially problematic. So I'm wondering, are our priorities shifting culturally, and could that potentially be problematic if we're starting to prioritize work and career over marriage and family?
Yeah. And then when you think about like our parents' generations and our grandparents, yes, some people married for love, but a lot of people in that generation married to get out of circumstances that weren't the best.
Oh, let's be real.
Yeah. Yes. And so now that they're having children and things like that, and their children had children, they are encouraging like, okay, look, these are the mistakes I made. Don't make this mistake. So get your education first, get a good job. And then it's kind of like, okay, you know, if you want to get married. But I'm a firm believer in that you can only do anything to the extent of your own brokenness. So even with parenting, if I have not taken time out to heal, to elevate my mindset in regards to the true meaning behind marriage and the significance of it, I am just going to kind of hit that glass ceiling in regards to the information that I share with my children.
Oh, wow.
And so to whatever the extent of your brokenness is, that's where you're going to cap out at.
Oh,
and
that's
so
true.
And so it's important to continue to grow, learn, elevate, so that we can have different conversations with our church, especially our kids and their generations to come.
Oh, goodness, that's so real. And you said something that, you know, resonated with me with respect to sometimes the motivation for marriage historically was different from what it is today. And that's so true. Eli Finkel, I believe he's at Northwestern University. He's a marriage expert. Wrote the book, The All or Nothing Marriage. If you're interested in it, it's a wonderful, very wonderful resource. Okay. But he's really big on the research and the science behind what really honestly makes marriage tick. And he talks about how historically marriage has changed. So, like maybe 1800s, 1850s, people got married for pragmatic reasons. People got married for, if you're thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they got married for those lower level needs to be met, such as food, shelter. Sometimes kids to farm the land and just very practical financial needs, right? And sometimes love had nothing to do with it, honestly. And so he called that was like more so pragmatic marriages. But then in the early 1900s, 1950s, like we I guess progressed to a love-based marriage. But interestingly, so we're at this era now, which makes me think about, kind of this unique position that I think not just women are in, but everyone's in with respect to achieving your personal goals, having personal growth in your marriage. So not only are people getting married now with the expectation for love, right? I mean, that's honestly basic now.
Right.
But now we are in the self-expressive marriage, the era of the self-expressive marriage, whereby people want both their personal growth. They want to achieve self-actualization due to this partnership. I want to be the best version of myself. I want to conquer the world because we're together and hoorah.
Yeah.
But, the expectations for marriage today are higher than they've ever been historically.
Oh, yeah.
Which could potentially be problematic because if you're not reaching those expectations, the cost of an average marriage today, and Eli Finkel talks a lot about this, the cost of an average marriage today is more costly. So the average marriages today are more unhappy than average marriages were just 50 years ago. And because we want this self-expression, we want this self-actualization. It's actually called the self-expressive marriage. And so we actually want more now.
Yeah.
We want it all. And so essentially that's kind of saying, I want it all. I want to, be able to achieve all these things in marriage and due to this partnership. And I think, sometimes we have to have a very balanced approach.
Right.
In that,
you have to know who you marry.
And know who you marry. Know your seasons. Know your seasons. A newborn season. I remember so when I had my newborn. Well, when we were building the business, I had just had our eldest, and he was a baby. I remember I was at health screening events, him strapped on to me, physically trying to get people to come and come to the office and things like that. But that's a very different season.
Right.
That's a very demanding season as a mom and as, a father, and I think sometimes too, we have to maybe adjust our expectations at different seasons too.
And just realize that life is all about seasons. You're either entering one, you're in one, or you're exiting one. And so the thing is, seasons change too. So sometimes we can get into a season of life that seems a little bit more extended than we would like. But seasons change. So it will eventually have to change.
Yes, it does. Oh my goodness, this has just been so rich. And I am just so grateful to, have you here and sharing your expertise. And what would be your one parting word with respect to finding that balance, having it all, or, if that's realistic, what would be your encouragement for women out there, men out there? I think they have a lot on their plates too. What is your kind of final suggestion to put a little nice little bow on it, tied up together?
What I would definitely like to say, I would love to tell women to make space for yourself. We make time and space for everything else, everyone else, but make time and space for yourself. Knowing your worth, having that self-love, because oftentimes women, we are highly critical of ourselves. And so just pausing to just love the skin you're in. In order to make changes, you have to love yourself, because we take care of things that we love.
Oh, that's good.
And so in order to make changes that you want to see, love yourself first and make space and time for yourself.
Oh, I absolutely love it. So this is a really fun part of the podcast where we kind of just take a question. We don't know what the question is about.
Okay.
But it's a little question from our fishbowl, and, and we just kind of answer it, to the best of our little abilities. I
love it. Let's do it.
And so let's see here what we have for today. Okay. I may say got to. Oh. Woo! This one's interesting, family. So this question asks, and it may not necessarily be boundaries related, but this is a mixed bag. We never know what we're gonna get, right? So it says, is it okay to date? So this is for my single ladies out there watching, or single men, or all the single men. So this one is it okay to date someone your ex knows?
Oh, your ex knows.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's kind of layered.
It's so layered.
Yeah.
I would have a couple of questions first.
Me too. Because it's like, okay, how closely do they know them? But it depends. I have very strict boundaries when it comes to that. Like, I don't need no cross relations or anything like that. So, I guess it just depends on what your preference is. It sounds. I need more context.
We may need a little bit more information.
But it sounded a little too close. If I got to ask a question about it, it may be a little too close.
and I always say a good gauge for whether you want to do something is, would you feel okay if it was done to you?
Yes.
So regardless of knowing the context, like, would you be okay with this happening to you? And then I think this also comes in with respect to your own personal standards.
Yes.
And so regardless of what other people do to you, like, what are going to be your own personal standards of how you're going to navigate friendships, as well as relationships? Now, granted, if you're single and you're no longer with that person, then you have, I guess you quote unquote don't have an obligation to them any longer. But how would you feel if the shoe was on the other foot? Yeah. And I think that may have to be kind of your gauge. It's almost like, doing to others you want them doing to you, type of thing. And like, just kind of maybe having your own personal standard with that respect. And there are so many, I guess, little fish in the sea. And nowadays, see, I'm old. I mean, I'm not too old, but, but I mean, online dating wasn't that big when I was back in the day.
Right.
But the other thing about online dating that I think is advantageous is that, if it's really sincere, they can really match you with compatibility with questions and things that you probably wouldn't get if you were just kind of, if you didn't really know the person. If you knew them or you met them in person, you may not be able to do a compatibility test and say, okay, are you compatible with me on these different features? And so I would just say, I would maybe recommend online dating, as well as a potential avenue to find people who may not know your people. That may be a good suggestion, with the online dating. And what's really interesting about online dating, sometimes I don't know if there's shame or if it's taboo, but anymore, like it used to be. But the reality is, I believe about a quarter of all marriages started online. It started through online dating. So that's a very viable option.
Yeah.
And not endorsing one, I don't know, but I've heard some good things. Now, my students, they tell me that Tinder ain't it, but I don't know. That's just my students. They, they keep me up to date.
Oh yeah,
I'm grateful for myself. Y'all know I teach at a university level, and I love my students. They keep me in the know. So that would just be my suggestion. Maybe just think about, how would you feel if the same thing happened to you? What's going to be your personal standard, and live by that. And then, to find some fish in the sea that don't know your ex, you may want to consider online dating.
And whatever decision you make, stand in it. So
Yeah.
if you do decide to do that, stand boldly in it. Be unashamed. Have fun. And then if not, don't do it.
Yeah, so
But whatever
definitely.
decision you make, just stand wholeheartedly in it.
Yeah, so definitely. And one thing about our podcast is that we want you to have something practical that you can leave with. And so I would recommend, actually write out what would your ideal lifestyle look like. And you can start with an ideal week. Like for this week, what would it look like if you had ample time for your business, if you had ample time for your babies, if you had, ample time for your spouse or your significant other? Like, what would that look like so that we have at least a target?
Right. And you can begin prioritizing, like, where do I need to spend my energy and time this week?
Yes. Oh, I can't thank you enough for just joining me and joining our community, and by sharing your expertise, and reaching our community. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Toya.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. I know that you are just dropping those value nuggets and jewels, and hope y'all were collecting. Got your little transfer box out. And collecting all the wealth and jewels that you share. And I really appreciate you. And as you know, love you and I mean it. Little virtual hug. But that's all for now. We'll see you guys next time.